Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Welcome back to Houselights, in particular the House of Zemeckis, our last stop this week as we go along looking at the works of Robert Zemeckis of the 1990s, capping off with Castaway, which was released in 2000, but hey, we wanted to talk about Castaway. I am one of your humble hosts, John FedEx Mills, and I am joined by Darren UPS Moser and Tristan, who the hell uses the Postal Service anymore, Riddell, for a discussion of a film that is large in scope and very ambitious, especially considering Zemeckis released not one, but two movies that year. He released What Lies Beneath in July of 2000, and then Castaway came out in December of 2000. Quite a feat considering the scope of Castaway and its challenges for filming. So we've talked often about how Zemeckis is up for challenges and likes to give himself something to do. And I guess we can come in here and we can say, well, he made up for it being 3 years since Contact by doing two films. So, and that makes up for the extra skipped year in the 90s as well. Either way, Darren and Tristan, I know I did not see this in the movie theater when it came out. I had reasons. Maybe we'll talk about them later. Maybe we won't. Who knows? But the two of you, did either of you see it in the movie theater? And follow-up question, Tristan, was this a Riddell family favorite, or is this only your second time ever seeing it?
I'm shocked that is a follow-up question, John. That is
it's the first
question.
It's not the first question. It's a follow-up question.
This was not a Riddell family favorite, which I don't know why, because this has the makings of a Riddell family favorite. We all love Tom Hanks, and like it's there's no this is, you could call this a family movie. Like it has some dire moments, but there's nothing crazy in it, you know. No, this just wasn't one that tickled everybody's fancy, or at least one that we all watch together, that we associate with each other. I do have one memory of it watching. I didn't see it in the theater, but I remember the marketing campaign for this was done really, really well, because I think like one teaser showed the plane crash, like Tom Hanks going through the plane crash, and that it ends with him just walking on the beach for the first time, saying hello or something like that. And then it ends and you're like, oh wow, interesting. Like Tom Hanks alone on an island. Okay, yeah, I would pay.
Back
Here's
when
my
trailers
$6.
didn't, spoil the entire movie in 30 seconds.
Right. Or the first 6 seconds for the YouTube algorithm. Yeah, it was yeah, I remember the campaign was done really well, the marketing campaign. And I also remember, I think it was the Oscars or some award show, and it was in between filming of Castaway when they haven't started the second phase of filming yet. And then Tom Hanks was at an award show. He was super skinny. He had the beard, and the camera cut to him as he was clapping for an award. And my whole family was like, what the hell happened to Tom Hanks? Like, I really hope that's for a role. And one other memory I have is I saw this at, like, there was a girl in high school, I think it was high school, who I was involved with, and we were watching it together with her family, and her mom started crying when Wilson floated away, and she started screaming because she was so angry at herself. She's like, I'm not crying over a goddamn volleyball.
Wow. Well, that's a complicated catharsis going on right there. So that's, I can say that that's not entirely surprising, though, because Wilson became a bit of a cultural phenom. But Darren, did you see this in the movie theater, or did you hold on to this for home video?
No, I did. I think the trailer got us. We were like, okay, this looks really, it's Tom Hanks, and he was just king in the late 90s. So it was a very easy sell to see this. And when you talk about, the familyness of it, Tristan, I'd say the only thing about this movie is it's kind of a queasy movie. As a part, there's blood, and there's like uncomfortable situations. Like, I don't want to have to think about being my own dentist, but that's not a bad thing. That's not going to scar me. But you're watching this character go through these moments and you're like, I don't want to do that. So, but I think for me, yeah, I remember it all, the touchstones, the Wilson was all over, either comedy gags or late night or whatever.
Oh,
but
yeah.
The thing I remember the most, though, which was just totally tapping into the culturalness of it, was the following year's Super Bowl commercial, which I think was a FedEx commercial, or it was spoofing something, but it was, him at the end delivering the package. But in this version, there's someone there as he's delivering it, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to see what's in it?" And he's like, "Oh, sure." And it's like GPS phone, packet of seeds, fire starter, and basically everything would have gotten him rescued in like 5 minutes. And he's like, "Oh, okay." And then it just like cuts, and it was such a clever idea. It's like an SNL sketch.
It was
one of the best.
Goodness.
It was a great send up back when Super Bowl commercials were truly great and inspired. I'll go ahead and share. Timing is so important, and this movie actually wound up playing an important role for me later when I saw it on disc, borrowed from a guy I've known since I was 14 years old, Mike, and he was like, "I really think you should see this," because what had happened was my mom had died just a few months before Castaway came out. So I wasn't much of a moviegoer for a few months afterward, obviously. And this was right around Christmas time of that first year, and the family's all, it's a little dour. But when I did see this on disc, it had an impact. Like, I think that the reason that those jokes resonated with people, the reason that Wilson became a thing, was this was like a Forrest Gump type moment where it didn't even really matter whether you liked the movie. It was just part of the cultural conversation. And Zemeckis has a real gift for that. And I think we've encountered that as we've gone through his filmography, where it's like, I'd say that Death Becomes Her and Contact, again, are victims. And I mean, What Lies Beneath is an absolute victim of this, where every so often he just comes out of the left field and just hits you with something that dominates everything else, and you forget everything else that like he's done. And sometimes the other movies that were released in that year, it becomes a very very weird sort of filmography to go through from my perspective. But part of that is he's reuniting with Hanks. And I wanted to throw out there, Darren, to you first. Did you get a sense at all that reuniting with Hanks in specific was in any sense a cynical move? Is there anything about this where you look at it and you go, he went with Hanks because he worked with him on Forrest Gump. He should have gone with a different actor because, like a Daniel Day-Lewis, who would have actually stranded himself on an island for 5 years. So they would have had to, suspend filming.
Method acting.
It would have been a Richard Linklater production where it would have taken him 14 years to film the thing. But I mean, like that sort of thing. Is Hanks successful enough here that he's the guy you're like, definitely should have been Hanks, or did at any point it creep into you where you're like, a different actor could have probably done something more dynamic with it?
Yeah, I get the question. Is Hanks the safe bet? A guy I've worked with and I'm trusting because we're going to be shooting and also involve like gaining and losing weight. And, I think overall it was like a 15, 16 month shoot, which is a long time. Not that he was shooting every single day of that, but just the whole process. No, I think Hanks was the right call. I look back to Forrest Gump, and you have this aspect of Hanks working in the role that he has to come across as likable. He has to come across as, genuine. And in this movie, you need to connect to him. Otherwise, this is a caring movie. You need to care about the character, or it's just like you're watching an episode of Survivor and, oh, he got voted off this week, I don't care. You need And he takes us through that entire range of, okay, this guy's a workaholic. He's, I think the dynamic of the scene where him and Helen Hunt open up their like day planners and are trying to find a time to get together, you feel that. You're like, oh, this is this kind of a relationship. So all of that through his isolation and the cathartic ending. Yeah, I think maybe there's a 10% of it is I've worked with this guy and I trust it, but I think Hanks was the right call.
Tristan?
I think Tom Hanks brings this kind of everyman energy that was very much needed in Castaway. And by everyman, I mean, I know that Tom Hanks is revered and I do believe that he's a special type of actor, but Tom Hanks brings this genuine kind of quality to the film and to his acting where, like we never want to see him as a bad guy. He's America's dad. And you want to see what America's dad would look like on an island. Like if you dropped off, an action hero on an island, you would feel like if you drop Sylvester Stallone, you'd be like, oh, okay, he's just going to go all Rambo and like MacGyver his way out of the situation. But with Tom Hanks, you really do ask yourself, how is he going to get along? How is he going to do this? It kind of makes me think of Ebert did a review on The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Fincher version, and talked about how there was an inherent problem with having Daniel Craig be the Mikhail character because, like, by that time, he was already James Bond. And he's like, in the back of your mind, you know that James Bond is going to get out of the torture chamber. You know that James Bond is going to survive. But when you watch the Swedish version, you have no idea if Mikhail is going to survive because it's not James Bond. So I feel like with Tom Hanks and Castaway, it was perfect casting because it really makes you wonder, like, if Tom Hanks could survive, maybe I could survive. And so you're a little bit more emotionally invested.
I accept that. I think that Hanks is the right choice because the concept of the film is difficult for audiences to plug into, and it is a shortcut to getting butts in the seats for the reasons you're talking about, Tristan, where people see him as America's dad, like you were saying, and you're going to root for him without believing he can make it necessarily. He's still got to prove, he's got to go through it, and you believe he can lose. And Darren, I think that you're right, that Hanks has built up enough esteem by this point that he's in the conversation automatically as worthy of doing the difficult role. This isn't taking a gamble on a comedic actor with Philadelphia. This is Hanks has the pedigree by this point to say, he can do this. I believe he can do this. And if it makes the investors a little easier and more forgiving of the way you're going to shoot this film, so much the better. So much the better. But speaking of the way they shoot the film, I'd be interested to know, Darren, I think it's very judicious in its use of visual effects. I think that they use them when they need them, but otherwise they frame them with items that are, if they could film it for real, they did film it for real, and other things, they did what they had to. Do you feel that those effects hold up, or did they, 25 years later, take you out of the film in any way?
Well, I think, I didn't even think about visual effects in this rewatch, but upon thinking about it for 2 seconds, these are the best kind of background effects where it's the storm. It's, the little prop thing has to roll up at the exact right moment, but it's all as much as possible practical for practical. And the only thing that it didn't pull me out, it more made me question, like, I'm wondering how they shot this, was the very early shot where the camera is following in kind of a riding along with the package POV. And I'm thinking, well, this is 2000. So there's no iPhone we strap to this. So is there just a guy with a full on camera rig, like huffing it behind little Tommy who's carrying this? I was actually genuinely curious how they pulled off those shots. And it's probably simpler than I'm thinking about it, and that's not a negative to be pulled out in that way. It was more curiosity. But no, overall, these are like the Truman Show or set extensions where we change the sky or we had to add a storm, those kinds of effects. Whereas everything else is extremely practical. You feel like you're on this island. They never place the camera, and here's a bird eye view of his island like a drone would shoot. Why would we ever have that perspective? Why would we ever? We only really get a good look at the island when he's rowing away from it. And that's the first time he's seen his island that far away. So I think it works great.
I appreciate what you're saying. I think there are a couple of shots, Tristan. I think there are like one or two shots where I look at them and I go, that's as good as they could do in 2000. Did you find any shots like that at all?
There was actually, when I watched this, there was something I noticed for the first time was the first time we look through the cockpit of the plane, the ocean is right up to the window. It looks like they're skimming across the bottom of the ocean as they're flying. And you're just like, oh my God, like no wonder they're having a problem.
Right.
Like, you're too low. But then the very next shot is just blackness, like they're above the clouds. And then when they're starting to descend, you see them go through the clouds and then you see the ocean. So they clearly screwed up in that one shot where I don't know how they could have missed it. But it was a huge screw up to have the ocean in the outside window when you're supposed to be an airliner above the weather. Regardless, though, I think that was probably the biggest thing. Was that? But this was I loved how much of a departure this was for Zemeckis. When you come from Contact and Forrest Gump. And you look at his filmography with so many other technical advances and motion capture and things like that. Like this was as most bare bones as you can get with Robert Zemeckis. Maybe, I was about to say What Lies Beneath, which is a movie that we're totally skipping over because I forgot that What Lies Beneath came out in July.
I totally forgot that.
It came out in December.
Everybody, like I was saying, like he did 2 in 1 year just to make up for the extra year off. Everybody forgets about What Lies Beneath. Like even more than Death Becomes Her.
Yeah, my dad and I really liked What Lies Beneath. Like that's a bare bones movie. Like it's a psychological thriller. It's not fantastic, but it's an interesting watch. It's worth seeing.
The strange thing is that's the one I saw in the theater that year. I probably would have seen Castaway if my life had continued on without the tragedy and everything. But like. It's weird to me because as we're prepping for this, I looked up and I saw the whole thing about July and I was like, oh yeah, I did go see that in the movie theater. I forgot that movie even existed. And what you're saying, yeah, we won't rabbit hole. It's okay. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. There. It's fine. It doesn't, that's one of those movies where I tell people not every movie has to change your life.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
one of those movies.
Well,
exactly.
And isn't that what he basically quickly shot while they were waiting for Tom Hanks to like lose weight?
Yes.
So like he filmed it as a pocket movie in the middle of his other movie. Like that's still like the most badass way of shooting something that was okay.
Honestly, I think probably it's like somebody who has something to distract themselves where they're trying to work out a different problem. And like he can go on set and he can do that thing. And like in the back of his brain, he's like, oh, wait a minute. No. I could take the camera when we go back to the island and we could do this with him instead. That sort of thing. But in terms of the way this is shot, the framing, the aspect ratio is a departure from previous work with Zemeckis. It's lensed differently, even though he keeps the same, crew largely, editor and everything going along with him. Darren, did that take you by surprise at all? Do you think that was a practical consideration? Do you think it helps the movie to have a narrower field of vision?
I mean, to be honest, I didn't give a ton of thought about it, but I will say the feeling I got from the framing was a bit of closeness. You feel like you are right there with him, almost not too close as in he put a camera down and he's vlogging from the island. It's still a little bit away from that, but there aren't sweeping vistas and it's not that kind of a shot of movie. So no, I think moving the action, as it were, a little closer to your character, especially when he's going to be in 95% of the frames. Like, this is a Hanks movie. So I think it worked.
Tristan, same question.
I love that he filmed this in 1.85 aspect ratio. I remember when I pulled it up on the TV and clicked it, I was surprised that it wasn't anamorphic, that it wasn't 2.39. And I was also kind of taken aback at how much grain there was at the beginning. Did you guys notice that too? Like, there was a lot more grain than what you would expect for a 2000 film. And I thought that was interesting because it definitely gave it a texture that you hadn't noticed in previous films. Like, if you watch Contact, you don't really notice the grain or that kind of texture. Even Gump, you didn't even really notice it that much. Maybe more so than Contact. But it was. It's interesting because, like, the type of film that he used, like the actual film stock he used, had a little bit more dynamic range and allowed for a little bit richer color reproduction. Like, did you guys notice that at all with this? Like, the colors were a little bit richer than in previous films because the palette is a little constrained. Seeing it's on an island.
I agree with you. The palette is restrained for the obvious reasons and everything, but the sky really, and I hate to use the word, the sky pops at certain moments. I trust me, I want to cut off my own nose for saying it. I apologize to everybody, but the richer colors, I think, really help some of those shots because it makes what could be a very flat and boring looking film be more dynamic. So I mean, but obviously Don Burgess, who was working with him since Gump, at least, I think really, this is a duo. Like, he's found his director of photography that got exactly what he was going for, because the balance here is he's balancing those visual effects. And I think that actually framing it the way that he did is helpful on the island, but I think it's clutch in the plane crash. It is absolutely clutch in the plane crash because it is so claustrophobic and you're so up in there that, honestly, I watch it and everybody knows I hate flying. I watch a film like this and I'm like, well, yeah, that's a 50-50 chance every time you go in the air. Like, this is exactly what's going to happen at one point. It's coming.
I wish the audience could know how little you're joking.
It's not a bit. I swear to God, it's not a bit. My palms start sweating during that scene. I'm like, yeah, this is exactly. I'm going to fly back home to see my family. This is what's going to happen. Yeah, exactly.
John and I text each other every day. I get way more texts than I usually do when he's flying or about to fly.
That is true. I absolutely light up the world because, like, I will actually sit down next to people in a plane and I'll be like, I'm a bad flyer. I'm letting you know that. Do not take any cues off of me. That is how I open every conversation.
We may have to hold hands.
Yes.
So with this movie specifically, like, since you're talking about Burgess, I loved how minimalistic the camera work was in this movie. How long the takes were, how they focused on natural lighting. Like when you saw the fire, whenever he had a fire, that's mostly what was used.
Yeah.
To light the scene. And it really showed. No, like, did they bring in lights? Of course they did. This wasn't like The Revenant where it was all just natural light, but you could tell that was the main motivated light, was natural light sources. And I felt like it really, and also the absence of the score. Like, you didn't get Silvestri's score on the island. I thought that was such a great aesthetic choice that really showcases the isolation, along with the longer takes. And some wide shots and close-ups, I felt like it really, really worked. Like, this is Zemeckis and Burgess working together and firing on all cylinders.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that about the naturalistic lighting, but obviously they brought in lights. Darren, do you think that we should be grateful that this film was conceived and shot before the huge digital camera revolution? Because Tristan references the Revenant. I like, the whole time I'm watching it this time, I'm like, oh my Lord, I know exactly what this film would look like if somebody came up with it today. I already know what it would look like.
If Zemeckis did this today, he'd be using like the most advanced digital cameras and shoot in the dark as much as he could.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and the fact that he doesn't even get fire for like a while. So it's just better shoot during the day or hope there's a moon out at night. And part of it, he's in a cave, which is actually a major set piece on the island. But circling back around to the sound editing, as it were, yeah, not only did we not have score until the very end, but I most noticed it when he's back at the FedEx business and you're hearing cars honking in the background, and you're hearing, which it kind of caught me off guard because it's obviously a choice, because normally when you're in a scene like that, like in an office building or whatever, you don't want to hear the outside world. You don't want it to pull you out. But in this case, the inverse is true. You want it to be like the whole vibe of that portion is everyone's kind of scurrying around in their minutia of life, which isn't a bad thing, but it's so jarring for Chuck coming back to, okay, see you tomorrow for another day of work. Like when before it was, I hope I live through tomorrow. I hope I find food or water. So yeah, the use of, or the lack of extra sound, even the fact that there's, besides the crab and fish, there's no animals on the island. There's no birds or wild cats or anything like that. And it's shockingly isolating because of it.
I'm glad you mentioned the sound, because I think the sound design in this is tremendous for the reasons you're talking about. When he's on the island, it sounds isolating. It's like that. And what I love coming back to it this time is it's never called out, but I think the subtext is still there. We all love to go to island paradises or think about going to island paradises. And we're like, oh, I would love to be there and live there. No, you would love to live there and be there in a resort in an island paradise. You have no desire to be.
You want to live in Hawaii. That's what you want to do.
You want to live somewhere where they built things and you have electricity.
Infrastructure, my friends.
Exactly.
Infrastructure.
Exactly. Maybe some pavement and 2-day shipping. Who knows? But and we'll come back to the shipping. Trust me. But this was nominated for Best Sound, but that Academy Award went to a different film. And that went to Gladiator, which we all love. We all know.
I thought it went to The Matrix.
No.
This is 01.
Matrix came out in 99.
Oh.
This came out in 2000. So for those awards, Gladiator won. Castaway was nominated. The Patriot was nominated. The Perfect Storm was nominated. More water effects for you there. And U-571, which is a movie nobody 3 people saw. Who knows?
I saw it.
Well, there you go.
Submarine
you and the other 2 people in the theater. Who knows? But I mean, I hear it and I'm like, oh, now I want to go back and watch Gladiator because I know the sound design was great on that, but
it really was
tough. I know it is.
No, it's really, really good. Like
I know.
Like, okay, so Gladiator was one of the first DVDs I ever owned.
Scene, like just that.
And I would put in Gladiator to showcase my dad's surround sound system. Like that's what we would do. Like we would pop in Gladiator, and like when he throws the sword, when they're about to execute him towards the beginning, and he gets away and he's off screen, and then all of a sudden you hear a sword just like go past the camera. It's freaking amazing. Like just that one bit, because you can totally feel it. It feels like it just whizzed past your ear. And you have the war scenes and the animals.
There's no question.
You just have so much.
Gladiator has more going on, and it's very on point. It's very well done. This is a much more subtle type of score, and I'm not saying that to like throw shade at Gladiator. I'm saying this, to Darren, what you were talking about a minute ago. Like this is one where the sound is a character in a way that you don't even really notice. And it, you mentioned, Tristan, the lack of score on the island, and it made me think of Dog Day Afternoon, where you don't realize that the music is missing until the end, and you're like, oh yeah, right. And you realize exactly how on point that whole team had to be to keep you invested without the emotional cheat code that a film score is.
No Country also.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right. I forgot about that. Oh my gosh, yes. But that said, it's still a great design, but playing into everything else, as we've talked about, Hanks is a very, I'll just go ahead and I'll ask you first, Tristan. Do you think other directors would have had the courage that Zemeckis does here not to cut to the people back in the world while Hanks is isolated?
Yes, I do believe that other directors would have done that. I was actually thinking about that as I was watching this, where it would have been so easy. It would have been so easy to show the search, to show Helen Hunt struggle with a new relationship. It would have been really, really easy. But I think the idea of it, they went in with the best intentions. It was, we're showing this movie from the perspective of Tom Hanks. Like, this is his movie. This, like, we're like, there's no reason to cut back. There's no reason to show a flashback. That would have been even easier to do. Was like, oh, he's thinking about his life back home, and we see what he's thinking. I'm trying to think of another director that wouldn't have cut back, and a director who would. I feel like Spielberg definitely would have cut back.
Oh, well, yeah. No, that's not
hardcore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would have shown what was going on or done flashbacks. I feel like maybe, Cuarón. He would not cut back. Alfonso Cuarón wouldn't cut back.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's my two examples of those who, obviously there's tons of who would and tons of who wouldn't, but those are the top two that kind of pop into my brain.
Fair.
Yeah, with
both sides.
With the cutting back, there's two things about it. One is, I think it would absolutely have destroyed the isolation. You would not have felt the isolation nearly as much if you're, and then, the Super Bowl happened and he's just like killing a crab. You would be like, what am I watching? The only thing as far as cutback that I think might be of interest, I'm not saying I'm advocating for it, but I feel like another director could have gone this route, which would have been start the movie with him washing up on the island, and all of the nightmare flashback when he's dreaming is like the crash and maybe a bit of the last day of FedEx. An interesting take. I don't think there's anything wrong with how we watched it in a linear progression, but directors love tossing us into the middle of the action and then flashbacking, how we got here. So I'm not saying I'm advocating it. I'm just saying it would have been an interesting take.
Yeah, you're right. I think I could easily see somebody doing that. I really could. Like, I could even see like a fan edit of that, somebody doing that.
Now, Darren, you mentioned that he worked for FedEx, which eventually by the third act, I kind of caught on. Right, he worked for FedEx, right? It gets there. Eventually, it seeps through. They can only be nuanced for so long. Tristan, coming back to it with 2025 eyes, or even projecting yourself backward to the first time you saw it, is the obvious backing of FedEx in this film to its detriment or to its benefit, or is it a neutral?
They didn't actually get any funding from FedEx for this.
You're kidding me.
No, they didn't.
I presume that they did because I was like, there's
it's an easy
no
presumption.
Way. Yeah, I absolutely presumed that they did. So they simply got FedEx's permission to use their logo, or
they got their permission and cooperation, but they didn't get any funding.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
So they were able to use their trucks.
Yeah, the original idea was from Hanks, wasn't it? Where he thought he was thinking of, or he had read somewhere about FedEx sends 3 planes over the Pacific every single day, and was like, what if one of those crashed? And then he brought a third, and Zemeckis brought a third, and it all kind of pieced together. But yeah, it does, though. I see what you're saying, though, John. The first 10 minutes of this movie, you're like, am I at a FedEx ad? Because it is everywhere.
I think it works. I think you have to use a brand like that. I think you had to do it back then. I think you absolutely have to do it today, because there's certain times when you have a fake brand You're like, okay, is this more inspired by UPS or is this more inspired by FedEx? It's just like, it looks like the UPS logo, but they're using FedEx colors. Like I feel like you get inside your own head more when you see a fake brand than if you just went ahead and used a normal one or an everyday one. It's kind of like when you see football in movies and they're not allowed to do an NFL team. It all feels like Canadian football.
Well, and that's I'm glad you bring that up, because football in specific, because I consider the whole FedEx thing a neutral. Like it's one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, okay, he works for a real company that I understand. That's fine. And then I can compartmentalize, because obviously I presume FedEx must have kicked in some funding. But either way, even if they had, I'm like, I was able to be like, okay, well, he works for FedEx, so that I believe that this is occurring in my planet, my existence. Fine. But the football thing, it always reminds me of an absolutely terrible movie starring Ben Affleck. It was him trying to be Jack Ryan. Oh, I forget the name of it right now. It was one where they blew up Baltimore. It was a Tom Clancy. Some of All Fears. That's the one. Morgan Freeman's the president.
I
in that
actually
one.
like Some of All Fears, but
I did not. I hated that movie. And one of the reasons I hated the movie is they went to a football game in Baltimore. And not only was the stadium indoors, which Baltimore Stadium is not, but neither team exists. And to your point, Tristan, I was like, I can't even pretend that this is the real world right now. Why did you even have this? If you had made it a soccer match, I'm with you. Okay, fine, because I know nothing about soccer, but the NFL, come on, brother. But yeah, so if you had put him for something where it was like UPS but with FedEx colors, it would have been like, okay, it's like the old movies where you see soda on the can. You're like, you couldn't just get the permission to use Coke. Yes, exactly. Slurm. So.
Well, and they were wise to do that, because really you have a matter of minutes to establish this character, to give us a reason why we need to care about him. And we find out, we're like, oh, he's a workaholic. He's way up in the chain. He's the guy who gets on the ground and gets places spun up. Like, this is a very demanding job. And then boom, he's in a relationship and you're like, oh my gosh, what is this going to be like? And yeah, you have a fleeting amount of time in the non-island world to establish the likability of this guy and give him his, give him his conscience, give him his reason for continuing. And it's Helen Hunt and the package are the two things that keep him going. And if you don't have any of that, then you're like, why should I care about this thought experiment of a guy crashing on an island?
Yeah, I setting all of that stuff aside, I wonder if there's also a challenge here for some audiences, and Tristan, I'll throw this to you, with the entire conceit of what a workaholic he is, or like that seems to have fallen a bit out of vogue. Do you think that aspect of his character is still relatable to modern audiences, or do you think that people regard that as more of a negative now than they did then?
I'll be honest with you. I didn't really see a workaholic. I didn't really get that
you
sense.
Didn't?
No. I got a guy who travels a lot for his job. I felt like it's kind of like like when my dad was a salesman. He traveled constantly, but when he was home, he was home. And it's even like, like when Hanks was talking with Helen Hunt, he's like, okay, well, like if I come back on the 6th, but then I got to go right back on the road, like on the 13th, like that's still some time in between. And it's not like, I didn't feel like they were trying to give us a sense that like all this guy cares about is work. It just sounds like he's the man on the ground. Like he's the one who gets other FedEx areas up to speed. And I know some of those people, I work with some of those people, and yeah, I just felt like I just thought that they showed like two people with demanding jobs. Like she's doing her dissertation and she has to defend it. And he's, traveling around the world he's talking about going to South America, coming back from Russia. Yeah, no, I didn't get that at all. I think it gave you a reason why he flies a lot.
See, I understand what you're saying, but I think the workaholic thing from my perspective comes across when he's giving that motivational speech to the people that, where he's standing it up. It's very, very, very energetic, and very passionate in the sense where I think it could be interpreted as he's excessively passionate about what he does.
I think the word workaholic, I think that's what's tripping us up. And maybe I feel like he's a person that the job is always number one. Other things have to flex around the job. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the nature of his job. And like I said before, I think the one scene that really sums up his relationship is when they both crack open their day planners and try to find a time. That's such a beautiful scene where you're like, oh, they're trying to make it work.
Do you remember that scene in Up in the Air? Like when they did that?
I never saw that. So,
oh my God.
What?
Reference is ruined. No, it's a good movie, but no, it's
You're welcome,
there's a very,
audience.
very similar scene between George Clooney and Vera Farmiga where they do that, and they crack open their plans. They're like, oh yeah, I could fly in from Oradea, it'd be totally fine.
Darren, I think you're right. I think the word workaholic is the wrong word to use. I think that
still don't get it. I still don't see it.
I just said it was the wrong word to use. What do you want me to do? Fly out there and apologize? Jeez. Anyway.
We know you won't fly, John. That's a different threat. We know that.
No, if I fly out there, it's to burn his car. We all know this. Anyway, I think that what comes across, I guess I should say, is that he's a guy where I think that engagement ring that he gives her, I think that this is a guy who his job has been the thing that's been the most important thing to him. And he's hitting a point where he's now questioning whether he needs to reprioritize things. That is sort of the sense that goes along there, because I think that there is a lot of subtle work that Hanks does with Hunt, where it really comes across the challenge that is there, but also the quiet moment of, everybody goes through this point where like you are driven, you're establishing yourself, you're climbing the ladder, you're doing the work, and then you hit a point where you're like, let me take a pause. Maybe I need to reprioritize. And I think it's actually a good thing for the film, because it adds to the tragedy of his plane going down. Is like he's right at that moment where he might be thinking about what's really important in his life and what those priorities are. At least that's the sense that I got.
With that in mind, I think if it was made today, like if Castaway was made today in 2025, there would be much more emphasis on digital connection and screens and the internet and everything like that, than opposed to making your job number one. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm saying that like it's just like with how connected the world is today, and how we all have smartphones, we all have 5 different forms of social media. I mean, Darren, I've messaged you on text, Slack, PlayStation, email, and I know I'm forgetting one other thing, but like this was all in like the span of a week. And there's always ways to get a hold of somebody, and there's always like Darren, you're in California, John, you're in Florida, I'm in Illinois. We're literally across the country, and it's interesting to like if you plucked one of us out and put us on an island, how would we survive? How would we maintain ourselves? Like without YouTube, how would we know how to start a fire?
I was just going to make the joke. First thing I'll do is I'll look up how to start. But I can't. No, God, but you're absolutely right, Tristan. I think if this was made nowadays, that would be more of the takeaway, and not as much reprioritization over work. It would be slowing down, taking a pace of life. Maybe they're brand manager for a hot singer, and everything's go, go, go. The album's about to drop and we got the new show coming, and all of a sudden it's like no phone, no nothing. Like you have to disconnect and survive the elements. So, I'm not advocating a Castaway 2, remake, because I don't think we need it, but we could see that type of movie working nowadays.
Heck, I don't even know what the timing is, but I could see some TV exec seeing this movie and going, but we'd call it Survivor. or something like
Right.
that.
Get Kevin Hart on the phone
right now. So speaking of the other supporting cast that's in here, I referenced Helen Hunt. She had a great moment of intense popularity in film for a time, and Castaway was part of that. Darren, do you feel that she brings a relatability to the role that works? Is she successful in what that character needs to portray? Given that this is a Hanks performance, do you also walk away feeling that this is a Helen Hunt film?
I do. I think she has a very strong performance. There's a lot of characters, but there's really like three people in this entire movie. It's Hanks, her and the best friend. And I think, this right around this time, you have, Twister, you have all sorts of, Mad About You and television.
As good as it gets.
As good as it gets. So she's showing her acting chops. And this one, can you imagine the pitch? You're like, we're going to use you in scene 1 through 5 and scene, 85 through 86 of this movie. And you have to convey 4 years of emotion. But I think she does. I was on the edge of my seat for not remembering exactly how the ending happened when he goes to her house. And I'm like, okay, I thought it was just going to be it for him seeing her out the window at the FedEx location. And he's like, oh, she did come, but the husband steered her away. Oh, I get it. But no, it goes, it's cathartic, that moment of seeing the search pattern, her memory wall of when it was all about trying to find him. Way better than let's cut back and forth with her and her struggle. So
I absolutely love when she faints. I think she did such a great job. I know it's just fainting, but I love that moment.
No, don't say it's just fainting, because that's an incredibly difficult thing to make look real in film. It really, truly is. She's no slouch in that scene. I go back and forth on that scene in particular. It's because I go back and forth in my brain whether it hurts more to be with him when he's expecting to see her and we still haven't seen her, and Chris Noth, the husband, comes in. So we haven't seen her yet because he hasn't seen her yet. And then he turns and the door opens and it's this dude and he's like, what? And as an audience, we would have said, where is she? Yeah. And then our first new shot of her is through the window. I think it would have made that scene hurt more.
That's really solid. I don't
ping the movie too. Yeah,
it makes more sense the way that you're talking about.
I don't ping the movie too hard for it, because I think, like so many other films, this is something where the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts sometimes. I don't want to fixate on this shot should have done. That's all that comes out in the wash, basically. No film has, not no film, but very few films have the luxury of being so perfect that you wouldn't change a thing. But in terms of the overall of the film, we talked about the sound design. The score is used sparingly, but Darren, is it effective?
Yeah, it is still if they played the main theme, I would be like, oh, this is Castaway. It's recognizable enough. Partially probably because of, how it's composed, but it's also, I was reading on the soundtrack and they were they're pulling okay, what can we put on this? It's I think the number one thing was the end credit piece, because there's just not a lot to go off of, but no, I don't think the score is overlooked at all. It's a minor aspect of this particular film with intent.
Tristan, in terms of the editing, I just pinged that little tiny scene where I'm I could have tweaked that, but in the micro and the macro, where do you land with the editing? Is this superb editing? Is this adequate editing? Or do you see chances for improvement here?
Well, I think besides what you just talked about, because you just bursted that bubble.
Sorry about that.
I think that this was you had limited amount of editing, especially when you were on the island. which I think was a very good thing. This was editing that didn't draw attention to itself, which is another good thing, because I didn't really think about the editing while I was watching it, which is a great thing. Because like you had longer takes, and like at the beginning, the camera work was way more frenetic and kind of shaky, and then once we get to the islands, a little bit more calm down, longer takes, a little bit more I want to say not lethargic, but like classic framing and classic motion. And so I think that the editing, it was an easier thing to edit because of the longer takes and the classic style of filmmaking. But yeah, I really don't have too many criticisms when it comes to that. I think there are certain times when the pace is a little slow, but it's hard to criticize it because it's intentional. Like you need. It's not like there's going to be, like, it's not like it's New York City on the island. Like it's not Manhattan. It's slow on purpose. There's nothing to do there except try to survive.
I like how the rush moment is, I have 2 months to make rope before the optimum time to, like, that's really start the montage of getting ready, but it's a 2-month amount of time. That's hitting the gas, which is hilarious because it's a huge amount of time. As far as editing, I mean, I also reflected into the story. This is such a solid story. And the thing that comes to my mind I'm thinking of editing not just in the shot to shot, but in the where parts of the story are placed. And I think the reveal of the fact that he thought of killing himself is placed later in the proper place. I think if that had been done chronologically and we'd seen it when it happened, it would not have been as impactful of, oh, I know where we can get 30 feet more rope. And I'm like, what? And then you're like, oh, and you know exactly what happened, but you didn't need to see it. You didn't need to see him wrestling with the moment to know that it would have been a horrific moment for him to go through. And it was all played out in an after the fact type of method. So I think that worked great. So overall, yeah, all of the bits, the, wishing for a dentist to, I love just where he learns about the point of light in the cave and how, I mean, this is true. This is what points will do through the course of a year. It's kind of a stretched figure 8. I think if you look at any classroom globe, you'll see that same symbol on somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. Funny enough, to be showing how that's how seasons are represented depending on your latitude.
So, we've come through. We've talked about a lot of technical stuff. We talked about the film as a whole. I think we're at the point now where we're ready to give our final ratings and any final thoughts that we have. And so, Tristan, I'll throw it to you first because Darren needs to remember that I'm the kind one of the two of us. But where do you land with 2000's Castaway, our last visit with Robert Zemeckis in what we're calling the 1990s?
I think this is a solid 4-star film. This is not a perfect film by any means, but this is 4 stars that really hits hard and gives you a sentimentality that I think is appropriate for the film. The shooting, the editing, the sound design, acting is all top notch. But I think if we were to compare it to other Zemeckis films, like if you look at, Back to the Future or Forrest Gump, like when you watch Forrest Gump, you're like, holy crap, 5 stars, one of the best. That is great. So it's hard having that in your filmography. It's because when you watch a movie that's not that mind-blowing as Forrest Gump was, you can't give it a 5 stars as well. And so that may not be fair, but I give this 4 stars because of that reason, because he's done other movies that are better than Castaway.
Darren, where do you land?
Yeah, totally going against what Tristan just said. I am actually choosing to give it 5 stars. It is a different kind of 5 stars than Forrest Gump, and it's I think it's very difficult to compare the two in some ways. I mean, one has a cast of 3 basically, and one has a cast of like dozens, and one is covering major American history, and one is a solo performance. But for the different ways that they do it, I'm captivated by the story. I'm captivated by the performance. It's funny, even though I watched this in one sitting, towards the very end, because you have the throughput of the wings throughout the entire movie. And when he chooses at the very end, I did not pick up the significance from the very first shot. And so I rewatched the first 6 minutes of the movie where we see the FedEx truck drive down the ranch, and the ranch sign has 2 names, whereas in 4 years later, it only has 1 name. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize how important this one character we see for a moment is going to be. And I like how it's implied that that's the road he chooses, and kind of strikes up a person he's kind of, I won't say is in a relationship, but has already impacted his life more than she knows. And I think that's beautiful. So I'm giving it 5 winged stars.
Darren, I love everything you said. Tristan, I understand what you said. And I'll throw this minor sop to you, that my first viewing of this was so therapeutic in a lot of ways because of the time that came out, and then my friend who told me to watch it and why he told me to watch it, that I know that there is undoubtedly some emotional connection there that's resonating with me on a certain level. But since that first viewing, I stick with that rating, which is 5 stars, because at the end of this film, every time I've watched it, emotionally, I'm there. I'm like, Zemeckis has successfully taken me on this entire journey, and in a less manipulative way than latter-day Spielberg, he has given me a happy ending that feels earned. It's not a cheat to have the happy ending here. I want the happy ending. I want him to tell me as an audience member, no matter what you're going through, it's going to be okay. And it's like, I think that Zemeckis delivers that message in an obvious, without being schmaltzy sort of way. And Hanks's performance is perfect for it. It's one of those things where I just consider the way it wraps up is so deftly done that emotionally it hit me in a different way, but equally heavy way as Forrest Gump's did. So this is a 5 for me, hands down. Zemeckis blows my mind with how easily he can get to that spot, even as we've gone through the 90s. And it's like, Death Becomes Her didn't really ring true. There were issues with Contact, but it's all of a thread. And you'll see that thread go through with later works of his. We won't be covering it, but when you get to, for instance, Flight with Denzel Washington, it's got that similar sort of thing where it's like, wow. And so yeah, 5 stars from me. And that wraps up our time with Robert Zemeckis, at least for now. So here we are, and we're getting ready next week to bring to you our 250th episode. Darren, do you want to give the audience a hint of how they can prepare for that episode?
Oh, well, set aside quite a bit of time, as we're going to look back at 1956 Cecil B. DeMille's epic, The 10 Commandments, here on Houselights.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.